Today, more people are demanding action to tackle the global climate crisis than ever before.
This is a fight across borders, across continents.
A sometimes bewildering array of critiques and responses are hitting the public consciousness. We wanted to take a closer look at one of the most familiar.
Trees could remove nearly 25% of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
We're going to have to put trees everywhere.
The target is to plant thousands of trees.
Trees suck up and store carbon, so why not plant more of them? It seems like a compellingly simple answer to the question of how humanity can begin to repair the planet. But what do the experts think? I'm a filmmaker here at The Economist, and I want to find out the real story behind trees and climate change. The world's ambition for reforestation, for planting trees, has never been greater. Private companies have schemes, like even Pornhub, for example. They had a scheme where for every 100 views, they would plant a tree.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because it's just an easy win for companies to say, plant a tree. If you do this, we'll plant a tree. But it's not as simple as that, and it's not necessarily having the benefit that the companies are saying.
This represents how much carbon could be stored if all reforestation projects are plantations, and this is if you let all forests regenerate naturally, like natural slow growth forest. You can see it's drastically higher.
So what are the pertinent kind of questions for you?
Because there's a big study a few weeks ago that said that tree planting has mind-blowing potential to tackle the climate crisis. So I think that's the kind of key starting point for our research, looking at to what extent that's true, to what extent trees and planting of trees can tackle climate change. When this study from the Crowther Lab was published in July, these were the headlines.
A new study is suggesting that the best way to fight climate change is through trees.
The study says this could reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by 25%.
I mean, nature sometimes has the best remedies, right?
So we're about to call Professor Tom Crowther, who said that tree planting has the mind-blowing potential to tackle the climate crisis. So we want to speak to him, find out how, and see whether it doesn't sound too good to be true.
Yeah, so I'm Tom Crowther. I'm an assistant professor of ecosystem ecology at ETH Zurich. And we, about a year ago here, started the Crowther Lab, where we sort of bring together a lot of perspectives to have a holistic understanding of where all the carbon on Earth is and how we can manage ecosystems to store more or less carbon in those areas.
For your recent study,
yeah,
why is that new and important?
So simply put, we just made a very high-resolution model of where trees could exist on the planet. And by quantifying how much carbon is in that land, we can actually show that restoring forests can capture far more carbon than we ever previously thought. What we found is actually forests have the potential to capture 200 gigatons of carbon. Since the start of the Industrial Revolution, we've got about 300 gigatons in the atmosphere. So it would be very slow. It would be over 200 years. But still, we're talking about a really, really powerful carbon drawdown solution.
These numbers are, sound great, but yeah, how does that translate to real world, real life?
I'm so glad you asked these questions, because the big media explosion was pretty devastating. It wasn't really, it was great. It got loads of people interested, but it also led to loads of confusion. We would never, ever propose that tree planting works everywhere. We're just showing the full potential. It's not like 200 gigatons are really going to come out of the atmosphere immediately. It would be amazing if we even reached 10% of that full potential. And so we need all of the possible climate change solutions in concert. But I do believe trees are more powerful than anything else that I know of. Because they're such a low-tech, easy access solution, anyone can get involved in it. You feel good about yourself when you give $1 to a tree, to plant a tree. It's more important than the simple carbon sequestered by trees. It's the advocacy that it promotes. I don't believe we'll address climate change until we all feel positive and engaged in the challenge. And I think it's a beautiful way to open the door to get us engaged.
The message that Tom was keen to communicate from his study was clearly both broader and more nuanced than some of the headlines suggested. But is he right to argue that trees are more powerful than anything else in engaging people in the climate crisis? We've written on the merits of different approaches to this challenge across the globe. So Asher and I sat down with one of our senior editors, Oliver Morton, who specialises in climate science and policy.
Yeah, well, I mean, there were some headlines on the crowd that the single most important thing people can do about climate change is to plant trees, and that's not really. The single most important thing people can do about climate change is to find ways to move humankind, off the use of fossil fuels. Which isn't to say planting trees isn't good, but, you know, by and large, getting off fossil fuels is very important. But I think that's true of almost anything anyone says about any single action. It's a good thing, but there's no magic bullet. I think key things to take into consideration when people talk about planting trees is what else is going on the land where they want to plant the trees. The other thing is that sometimes planting trees, you plant the wrong sorts of trees. In some parts of the world, planting trees makes the world warmer.
Simon Lewis actually pointed us to some studies which have...
If you're talking to Simon Lewis, I have no idea why you're talking to me anyway, because Simon has forgotten more about trees than I will ever know.
So Simon Lewis is an expert in global change science, and he's been talking us through a lot more of the detail on this. In fact, we're putting up on the website some articles and other research materials. If you want to take a look at them, then click on the info card in the top right hand of this screen. But for now, we're on the way to film an interview with Simon.
Increasing the forest area on Earth is really important, but we should remember that tree planting is not always good. It's all about how the trees fit with the local environment.
That often means balancing competing interests for the land, where those trees might be planted, and considering the needs of local communities. But it also matters where in the world those forests might grow. There are three main types of forest on the planet. Encircling the north, the vast boreal forest is disproportionately rich in carbon and covers large swathes of Russia, Canada, Alaska and Scandinavia. Diverse, temperate forests grow sporadically throughout the parts of the Earth with more moderate climate. And tropical forests grow along and close to the equator.
In the tropics, the trees are growing very fast. And because they're growing fast, because there's lots of resources, lots of sunlight, lots of water, and they're also evapotranspirating water to the atmosphere, which is helping cool.
That cooling occurs in part because the clouds, formed by this water in the atmosphere, reflect the sunlight. In the colder north, it's snow rather than clouds that offer the most reflection. Growing the boreal forest means less snow and more dark, absorbent tree cover.
Which means there's less of a cooling effect and there's more of a warming effect, which partly offsets the carbon storage in the forest and the boreal zone.
According to one study, in tropical forests that grew more than 40%, the temperature decreased by just over 1 degree Celsius. In temperate forests, it decreased by around half a degree. But in boreal forests, the temperature actually increased.
One example of a restoration project that's going quite well is in Uganda on the edge of Kibale National Park. Just 20 years after the initial planting, and it's moving back towards a mature forest and a very high carbon storage forest. So it's really possible to go from almost nothing to a really impressive forest in just a matter of decades in the tropics.
In your view, what are the main misunderstandings around tree planting?
It's great that everyone loves trees and loves tree planting. But what people forget, the emissions are going straight out in the here and the now. Those trees might absorb those emissions eventually in maybe 20 or 30, maybe 50 years, but there's a big time mismatch. We need to reduce fossil fuel emissions dramatically and fast, and then some of those residual emissions that we can't mop up and can't reduce, then we could use some tree planting to do that.
So there can be a more limited role for trees in helping to reduce carbon emissions, but even that's dependent on the type of trees in forests that are grown, which is why Simon has sent us to check out an interesting and very English project.
I'm here in Sussex, south of England, at the Knepp Castle estate. There's the castle. This estate is a former farm. It was a standard farm about 30 or 40 years ago. And the owners allowed the woods and the fields and the naturally occurring flora and fauna to flourish here by leaving them alone. We're here to talk about taking carbon out of the atmosphere and how much success it can have, not just here, but on a global scale.
Wilding is a hands-off approach. It's become a sort of environment that is a nursery for open-grown, freely regenerating trees. Within 20 years, we have doubled our carbon sequestered in the soil. We've got the scrub, we've got the grasses, we've got the trees. All that will be contributing to this carbon sink.
That's actually the start of another film, which you can watch by clicking the link opposite. In it, we look at why this hands-off approach is effective and some of the big challenges in terms of forestation. At the other link, you can see The Economist's latest writing on climate change. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe so you can get all our latest releases.